120 Pod. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be talking with Kimberly Emmanuel. She is a sepsis survivor and a member of the limb loss community as a result of her battle with septic shock following a kidney stone infection in 2021. Now, despite numerous challenges and changes to her daily life, Kimberly, a former educator, continues to use her teaching skills to inform and advocate for sepsis and AMR, antimicrobial resistance. I had the honor to meet her and her husband in person last September when it was Sepsis Awareness Month, and we were down on Capitol Hill talking to legislators with Sepsis Alliance. Kimberly's strength and determination astound me. They are notable as she pushes forward in her advocacy, no matter the daily challenges that septic shock has left her with. Number one being a quad amputee. Number two, Kimberly also is in need of a kidney transplant due to the damage that was done to her kidneys from sepsis. Nonetheless, Kimberly goes through every day with a smile on her face and kindness and compassion in her heart. I would like to let you all know that I do have some links in the description box below to fundraisers that would help Kimberly be able to pay for things, medical needs and incidentals and travel that she's going to require as part of her journey with her kidney transplant and any other of her needs that she requires. She recently got a service animal. There are just so many things that our amputee community is in need of. So if you have the ability to do so, please check out those links and help Kimberly out. It would be greatly appreciated. Kimberly, I've been excited to have you on the podcast. I've been really looking forward to this, and I want to welcome you today to the 120 Pod.
Kimberly, I am so happy that you're here today. I'd like to welcome you to the 120 Pod, and I'm just really excited to have this conversation with you today as part of the sepsis survivor community that you belong to and the limb loss community as well. And so anyway, welcome, Kimberly, and we can just go ahead and get right into it if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind at all. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Anyway, Kimberly, so you're a sepsis survivor as well, and I met you last year in person on Capitol Hill as we were down there advocating with Sepsis Alliance. And could you tell our viewers and listeners what happened to you? How did you develop sepsis?
Okay, so in 2021, we were, right there in the midst of COVID, and I was home with my husband. I'm an educator, and we were just coming back from going into second semester. And so I recall just being home with my husband, empty nesters, packing meals for the next day, getting ready for work. And my husband just, was talking to me, and that was the last thing that I recalled. What I was told happened was I actually lost consciousness, and my husband called 911, and the EMTs arrived at my home and began, trying to find vital signs, my blood pressure, make sure, my sugars were okay. My sugar numbers were not registering on their meter. My blood pressure was extremely low. My husband said it was like 40 over something. And so they really did scoop and just, took me to the hospital. The hospital that I ended up going to was Piedmont Henry, and just without knowing what they were dealing with, the EMTs called ahead and gave my vitals and gave the situation. This hospital happened to be a sepsis aware hospital, meaning the staff, the emergency department, they were trained on what to look for and how to quickly administer antibiotics just in case. And so I was on death's door, and I was immediately intubated. I was unable to kind of breathe for myself. My heart rate was very low. And so I was sent to ICU. I was put into a medically induced coma, and I was in a coma for about 17 days. And at that time, I had machines breathing for me. My husband was not allowed to come into the hospital. He sat in the parking lot waiting for them to call and give updates as to my status. Um, that was very that was very traumatizing in of itself. Not knowing what his wife was going through, what they were doing, to me, really just left a very scarred, impression on his heart. Fortunately, I was under the care of a nurse who I did not know, but who came to know my husband, and the two of them, as they shared information back and forth, as he kind of assured her that I was receiving the best medical care, they began praying together and for each other, and they just became prayer partners. And it was wonderful to know that she was praying over me, and that she was standing in the gap for my husband. I just received. I mean, my body really went through the whole um, checklist of trauma as sepsis began to take over my body. Now, prior to this, I did not know what sepsis was. I vaguely remember hearing sepsis, but always attributed it to something that older people got. It wasn't a young person's disease. And I was admitted into the hospital in January, and January was the month that I turned 50. So I did consider myself pretty young. I was, uh, they tried to take me off of the breathing machine. They tried to take me off of the life support systems that I was on. But unfortunately, that led to me going into cardiac arrest, and they lost me a couple of times. So they immediately put me back on this life support. I was on dialysis. My kidneys were failing. They attempted to take me off of that, and I had a mini stroke. So they were like, her body's fighting some, this isn't a good time. So they left me on, and January 19th came and went, and I celebrated my birthday alone in the intensive care unit. Uh, Fortunately, towards the end of January, they tried it again, and I was able to successfully come off the intubation tube, the breathing tube, and I was able to not, to be intubated, extubate, I guess is what the word is called, and I began the long road to recovery. I survived, but I was, part of that family of 5% of people, who do survive. I was categorized as having severe septic shock. So during the time that I was in this medically induced coma, and they tried to keep my blood pressure normal, they had to give me vasopressors, and that was drugs, medication, so that my body pulled needed blood to pump through my heart from my extremities. Well, being on that for a few days meant my extremities did not receive blood, and so as a result, my feet, my legs, my hands, they all died. They gangrene. And so when I woke up and I was trying to figure out at first what happened, I had no memory, thank goodness. I believe that was a blessing from God, but I had no memory of what happened, why was I here? My initial thought was I was in an accident. My husband, was gone because I didn't see him. And I survived, and they're just going to tell me this, my life has been completely shattered. So what they did tell me, I felt like was almost death in of itself. You survived this situation, but I did not know how difficult it was going to be a survivor. I was discharged and sent to a rehab center. Again, COVID, so they didn't really know what to do with me. I had no visitors. I had very limited OT support because I could not do anything with my hands and feet. My hands and feet were black from gangrene. And I just thought this was part of what having sepsis meant, and that I would be disfigured for the rest of my life. I just thought, okay, I just have to wear, mittens or something, or always have my legs covered. And unfortunately, it was my vascular doctor that said, you know, you can't have this on you. You have to have an amputation. This cannot stay on you. And I didn't understand. I said, this doesn't bother me. It doesn't hurt. Why do I have to have an amputation? And he explained that, gangrene is a form of infection, and I could have sepsis again, and not survive. So I just, and this was February, so I'm just waking up. I'm just understanding what my new world. I'm trying to figure out, how can I get back home, and how can I resume a normal life? How can I go back to working and taking care of my children? And to be told, no, you're going to have to have surgery to remove your limbs. So I just did what we just prayed. We didn't know what else to do. Our hands and fate were in the hands of surgeons who had only met me one other time before, and that was when I was the most sick, needing their expertise just to save my life. And now here I am with the vascular surgeon again, trying to decide what was the fate of my future. And so we decided to go ahead and move forward with the amputations. So April 8th, which happened to be my husband's birthday, um, we went ahead and I went ahead and had all four of my limbs amputated. The recovery, the amputation itself was not painful. They did a good job with pain management. I didn't know what to expect, but it wasn't as horrific as I maybe thought it was going to be. Um, but I remember thinking, and I was kind of shocked to listen to the nurses that were taking care of me talk about how little they knew about sepsis. They couldn't believe that sepsis could cause this much damage, physical damage. And I just was in awe with the fact that you are charged with taking care of me and you know very little about what has happened to me. And I really think, Jackie, that was the beginning of my advocacy journey. I just wanted, other people to not be in the same scared boat that I was sitting in, and not feel as terrified of the unknown. But I also wanted people just to know that this could happen to anyone. Anyone could be affected by sepsis, and it's very likely that to some extent we've we know people who have had sepsis. They may not have had it as severely as I did, but if they had to be hospitalized or had antibiotics, or needed, um, hospitalization to deal with an infection, they probably had a level or a degree of sepsis. So I'm only 4 years into this journey. And so I've learned a lot. I had to learn to let go of who I was and embrace who I was becoming. I retired early from a very wonderful, productive career. I had to put my physical and mental health first. I had to learn how to walk. I had to learn how to use prosthetics, daily living activities like eating and toileting and communicating. I had to learn all of that. Some of it was, through therapy, but a lot of it was through trial and error, getting up and trying to walk across my living room and falling and being okay with learning how to get up, especially if I was by myself. And initially, that first year, year or so, there was very little time that I was by myself. I was either with family or I was with friends, and I had a lot of friends come and spend time with me during the day, or come with, visit with me on the weekends. Just, first, to be with me, which was, I thought, just, it made an impression. But secondly, to give my husband, who was my primary caregiver, a break. They would come in and say, look, you go fishing. We got her. We'll be with her, You don't have to worry about cooking dinner. Here's something to get you through the weekend. So just those little things really helped us get through that first year, particularly, especially since I was going to therapy like 3 times a week, and that was PT OT therapy. It was very intense, but I needed it and I demanded it because I knew I could not just sit and be idle. I know I just had too much life left in me. So my story really has just been stay that course
You and I are
and
both
focus on my recovery.
into.
Just
Oh, I'm sorry, Kimberly, go ahead.
okay.
You and I are both 4 years in. I noticed that when you said
Yes.
2021, and I was sitting there thinking, I'm 4 years in. And I'm also, as I'm listening to you talk about that first year
Hmm.
is horrific. It's horrific.
Yeah.
And,
Because you don't know
and
what you don't know, and you don't know what to expect. And it's
right,
difficult. It's even more difficult when there's not someone walking alongside you who's been down that road to say, you're going to have some good days, you're going to have some bad days, but I really need you to hang on to those good days because here's the things I want you to always remember. Here's the things I want you to look at when you're having rough days. Here are the numbers I want you to call when you feel like you can't make it. You want someone walking down that road with you. And so having a mentor or an advocate means all the difference, means all the difference. And I know that that was something I lacked, and that was something I looked for when I got into my recovery. How can I give back? I need I need to make this easier and better for someone else.
exactly. Because as we're each going through our recoveries, we're going through it alone, and we think
Right.
we're alone.
Mhm.
And we get, and your husband, oh my gosh, your poor husband. All I kept thinking as you were talking about being in medically induced coma for
Yeah.
17 days,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
my husband was outside the ER that morning freaking out, but he did get to see me the next day after my surgery,
Okay.
and I didn't have that length of time
Right.
that you had. That, can't even imagine what that was like for your husband, and then the caretaking after, because I think a lot of caretakers for us sepsis patients, they kind of don't get thought about that much. That and it's a terribly hard job because they have
Yeah.
to help us every single day.
Well, and that's true. And what people don't take into account is like, so my husband, was in this coma. So my husband was like, what do I do? He can't come in the hospital. He can't sit with me. So he, was finally encouraged, go to work. We'll call you if something changes. If something happens, we'll call you. We'll get you to the hospital. So, reluctantly, he did. He had to go back to work. And so each night he would check in and see what the progress was, get an update from the doctor. But living your life on the edge like that, waiting, with that, um, you're just waiting to exhale. I need to know what the status is. And so we didn't know if it was going to be 3 days, 17 days, or 7 months. So when he finally got word that I was able to come out from sedation and I was responding and it looked like I was going to be receptive, then he was at the hospital and they allowed him to come in. And from that moment on, he didn't go back to work for 7 months.
Yeah, your
Okay.
husband could not go to work, or he did work while you were in the hospital. I can't even imagine how that went. Oh my God. And then when you came home, and then he had to take off because everything hits the fan when you come home, right?
Right. Yeah. So, right. So, not knowing what to expect. And so, he did come out of work, and uh, he was under FMLA, which gives him 12 months of protecting his job, but there's no check that goes with that.
No.
So for 7 months he was out of work, and by the grace of God, we were still able to cover all of our expenses. But we knew that we needed a lot more support then, you know, disability. At that time, we were still trying to figure out what we were entitled to. So between disability and Social Security, we were, you know, there were people, social workers, trying to figure out how best to get services and money, you know, to us. I had a friend that did set up a GoFundMe account, and that was very helpful because although I can go to therapy and I can go get medicines, it's the incidentals, it's the little things that, you know, you don't think about that go, you know, that add to the expense. And so those were the fees that
Travel to
we,
the hospital back and forth,
gas,
like,
parking,
and your
yes,
meals. Yeah.
absolutely,
Parking at
absolutely.
hospitals is very expensive. Yeah.
And you would think that a patient would get a pass, you know, would just get their parking
No.
validated, but I mean, they make a lot of money off of parking. Um, but yeah, we had to
Off
figure out
parking
how to
alone. Yeah.
navigate that. And at one time, I was going to like 6 or 7 doctor's appointments a week because I still need to get cleared from all the doctors that saw me in ER, plus follow up with all the specialists. And so my full-time job was going to a doctor. And for a month, I mean, we were slammed. And it just was not making sense to, there was no time in the day for my husband to do laundry, clean the house, cook food, and get me to and from all these appointments and therapy. So, you know, it's those little things that people really, you know, don't understand or have a great, you know, good understanding as to how difficult it is to have a traumatic medical experience or a chronic health illness that really impacts and alters the dynamics of your life. And it can't be measured with dollar signs. So I know
No,
you know what it's like
definitely
to
not.
live under that umbrella and how
Yeah.
stressful it can be between you and your spouse, you know? So that was a whole nother area, you know, that we
Right.
had to navigate because he was my spouse, secondly, my caregiver. And it was there were times where he felt like he was just a caregiver. You know, he had lost that role as a spouse. And so, you know, emotionally, we had to figure out our new norm.
Bingo. Same.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, my husband felt very useless
right, right.
because, he didn't, especially when I was in the hospital and the nurses had to do things for me and he wanted to help, but he didn't know how to help. And he was trying to like overhelp and overcompensate. And
Hmm.
my entire family, they just, we
Hmm.
want mom to be happy, but that was not a very happy time for me. And it wasn't
Right.
anything to do with them, but I think our families they take on more responsibility for things that they really shouldn't because they want us to be happy. They want us to be healthy and well again. And that's
Yeah.
just not in their power.
And one of the things I was most impressed by my husband was that he wanted to do everything. He wanted to learn how to do it. And so when there were some things that were offered to me, they were like, oh, well, maybe not because she doesn't have hands or feet. And my husband was like, show me what needs to be done. So he learned how to give me IV antibiotics. He learned how to change out the bags so that I can be home and not in a hospital. You know, he learned how to, I'm on PD dialysis, so I do dialysis at night. And he's the one that hooks me up and, you know, unhooks me in the morning, you know. So he is, you know, he really is uncertified, certified nurse because he knows how to do everything, you know. But that was, you know, something that he was very passionate about. And that was something that really made a lot of difference in my recovery. So I understand exactly what your husband was feeling.
Your husband, I got to meet him, of course, with you in DC last year, and he's quite an
Yeah.
amazing person. And I could just see him. I could just picture him being your bedside nurse and
Yeah.
doing everything,
He's my nightingale.
because
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's something too that and I just want to back up just a little bit because he was the one to begin with, who noticed that something was weird about you that day, right?
Yes.
Like you weren't sick prior to this happening, right?
No. No, and I
Like,
did not have the
and it
typical
just
signs of
came on.
sepsis. I apparently was, you know, I was actually just degrading in front of his eyes, and he kept noticing that I was not engaging in conversation or responding correctly. And at some point, he was like, "Hold on, I need to." So he got our insurance card, and he looked on the back, and he called the nurse hotline. I mean, he had the wherewithal to do that. Something was not right, and he
Yeah.
called the nurse hotline. And the nurse could hear me in the background, and she said, "Sean, ask her what her name is." And he did, and I mumbled something, and he said, "You need to go ahead and call 911." And had he not done that, or had he not listened to my stubborn self, because I would have insisted that we go sit in the waiting room and go to the ER. We're not calling an ambulance and making all our neighbors nervous about us. We're not bringing attention to us. If I had done that, I would have died. I would have died. And the ER doctor said
Most
that. He said
definitely. Yeah.
he was on death's door. It is you did the right thing, and it was just it was so providential that that EMTs took us to this hospital, and they knew to look for signs of sepsis. But the signs, were, low or, blood pressure. Well, my blood pressure was extremely low. An infection. Well, I didn't know I had an infection, and come to find out, I developed sepsis because I had a kidney stone. Well, if you've ever had a kidney stone, it hurts. You feel it. I didn't. I was
Yeah.
asymptomatic. Never knew I even had a kidney stone. Um, you can become
Oh
lethargic,
my goodness.
and what I developed was the cognitive decline. And so, because I was unable to communicate, I was declining, and that was what the nurse noticed, or could hear from her end, and what she was asking Sean to ask me questions about. But just that quickly, when you had the nurse on the phone, between that conversation and calling EMT, I lost consciousness. So that goes to show you how quickly someone, with sepsis, especially severe sepsis, can die, if it's not treated. And they run a series
Wow.
of blood tests to try to figure out what is causing the infection. But in the meantime, they give you a ton of antibiotics, hoping to one of them will be correct, and one of them will begin to cure the infection. So
Right.
several days later, they learn what the infection is. But by that time, I've been taking several doses of different kinds of antibiotics. But, I survived it, went home, and, little did I know that I would be back in the hospital less than 30 days later with another bout of sepsis. And that's one of the statistics that I, learned later, that, you're at a very high risk of having sepsis again. And I did, and I was
Right.
hospitalized for that for a few days so that they can give me, high dose antibiotics. But as you and I came to, learn down our road of recovery, being introduced or having several doses of antibiotics can work against you as well. So we know that we need antibiotics to cure sepsis or to treat sepsis, but repeated exposure to antibiotics also puts us at a higher risk for more infections. So it's a slippery slope, and it's something that we don't
Antimicrobial
really.
resistance.
Absolutely. And I never had heard that term until I was sitting in the hospital, dealing with a sepsis again, but also contracting C. diff, which you don't really get unless you're in a sterile, in a hospital environment. So I'm in the hospital being treated for sepsis, get exposed to another infection. So it's just, you don't want to walk in fear, but I'm very cautious about things or situations that would expose me to any type of infection, because any type of
Right.
infection could send, my body's already said it was going to respond at the hyper level of an infection. So, anything like strep, pink eye, any kind of infection, and I'm going to say this, that I would normally be exposed to as a teacher in an academic environment where kids come in and have all kinds of things. Just the slightest exposure to one of those illnesses or infections could put me back in the hospital again. And that's very frightening knowing that I deal with young kids. So I had to really
Oh,
learn a
yes.
lot about sepsis and be very cautious about my exposure.
That Dr. Molander, who I had on in my previous episode, and we talked about
Mhm.
that, infection prevention is sepsis
Yeah,
prevention. And when
right,
someone's been exposed and suffered not just one bout of sepsis, but two, as you did,
right.
you naturally, yes, you're going to have to be more cautious. And like you said, you can't
Hmm.
walk around in fear, but
Hmm.
we need to be aware of
Right.
and do what we can to prevent getting an infection.
Absolutely. And that just comes with a lot of knowledge and a lot of talking with doctors and being preventative. So, as the first year kind of a lot of energy was spent physically walking and learning how to use prosthetic hands and how to walk. And I was driving. Once I got my legs, I was driving, and I had my mobility in that way, and I felt like, please, Lord, don't take this away from me. So I was social. I got back out with my friends, and I was okay with where I was. Um, but then in October of 2022, I suffered two brain bleeds, and I was admitted to Emory Hospital. Emory Hospital, and they, were just
You
trying
were
to
in
make sure I
Georgia,
didn't have
right?
in Georgia, right? They were trying to make sure I didn't
Yes.
have a stroke, and so fortunately,
Right.
the scans showed that it was brain bleeds and not a hemorrhagic stroke. And so that meant, and I had to, now work with a neurologist to make sure there wasn't any damage. And that meant I really had to slow my roll. I really had to pull it in and slow down and just be very much aware of, my blood pressure and stress. I had to be very mindful of stress. And so for that next year, which would have been my second year of recovery, I just kind of reined it in. I kind of stayed home a little bit more. I was less likely to go out and do things with my friends unless they were driving. I was kind of, I mean, I wasn't told I couldn't drive, but I was afraid that if I had a stroke while I was driving, that I was putting more people at risk, so I just wanted to just be responsible about my healing. So there were never any other further issues with that, but it just goes to show how fragile, my body was, and that healing really was going to take place on my body's time, not my time, and I needed to be patient with myself and truly give myself grace. And so advocacy really began to happen a lot more behind the scenes and on social media, because I just wanted people
Right.
to know that this could be you. And that's how I became involved with Amputee Coalition and Sepsis Alliance. That's how you and I met, just through advocacy, because I didn't feel like I can go out and do much, but I could do a little bit more behind the scenes.
Right. And you, being a former teacher, I was a former teacher years ago, but you being a former teacher, or are you still teaching?
I'm not
Are you still
retired.
teaching? Okay. I think it's the former teacher in you who
Yes.
you are educating people.
Hmm.
That
Yes.
educator stays with you. And
Yes.
I've seen your social media, and I saw you
Mhm.
speak on Capitol Hill with Katie Granger and Dr.
Yeah.
Molander last year, and it was so incredible. Just hearing your story and the way you describe it is so helpful and informative to other people who have not gone
Good.
through this, who don't know what
Right.
sepsis is. And, Kimberly, you truly are helping so many people, but it's always amazing to hear your story. You know, the several times I've even heard it, every time it just has me in awe because of what your body went through and
Right.
what had to take place afterwards. Like, now you're still on dialysis, correct?
Yeah. So when
You need
I was
a kidney
initially,
transplant.
right. So when I was initially in the hospital going through this initial trauma, they worry about your brain, they worry about your organs, your heart. And so at some point, my kidneys were failing. So they put me on dialysis while I was still in this induced coma. I was able to come off of it because my body indicated that everything was bouncing back and I was doing okay. But as I followed up with my urologist, which is to find out why I had this initial kidney stone and if my kidneys were okay, um, it, it my kidneys were beginning to show decline. They were okay, then they started to decline. So it was determined that sepsis did in fact destroy my kidneys, and so I am on dialysis. I've been on dialysis for about a year. I've gone through the process to qualify for a kidney transplant, and so I'm on the wait list for University of Alabama and Emory University. Those are the two hospitals closest to me, or that I can get to the closest to receive a kidney. And so I've done the work, Jackie, to put out on social media my plea for a living donor. So I would, and information will be available to, to share with your viewers, your listeners,
Yes.
more about that. But I just have put out, there have been like 300 people that have, gone to my website and actually clicked to see if they could donate. And it's an easy process, but it's just finding that one right match. And so I'm also just
For the
waiting
living
for,
donor,
huh?
for the living donor,
Hmm.
what can people do? I mean, of course, I'm going to put all relevant links to everything that you need in my description for this
Right.
episode. So for the living donor, like, what do we do? What do people do? How can they
So
start the process to find out
I
if
will
they're
give you,
able
I
to
will
do
give you
that?
a link that you can share. I'll give you a link that you can share.
Okay.
And when you click on that link, it'll just ask you, I think, 5 questions, just to see if you are physically able to go through a donation process. They will not let you donate any organ, a kidney, a liver, if you're not physically healthy, and if you're not free of certain things, certain diseases. And after that, if answer the certain way, then a nurse contacts you and just asks you to come in and do some blood work, and then it's you go on from there. Apparently, it is a very easy surgery, and my insurance covers the donor's expense. So, living, healing expense, um, recovery expenses. So, the donor never comes out of pocket for anything. As a recipient, I um, will be sequestered or put away for a few weeks just so my body
Right.
can heal and they can watch for any evidence of rejection. And then after that,
Rejection. Yeah.
I'm able to re-enter the world and re-enter my community with a organ that will allow my body to function without the use of a machine every night. And so, one of the things that was
Yeah.
most scary for me was when they told me that my kidneys were failing. I thought, I can't go and do dialysis and sit in a dialysis center for 3 days for 4 or 5 hours. Who's going to get me there? How is that going to work? So those things were definitely stressful to me as a patient. And when I was told that dialysis at home was an option, I was like, tell me how to do it. Let me do this. I could do it. And so I am actually, definitely an advocate and, singing from the rooftops the wonderful option of PD dialysis, and something that people don't really know is an option available to them. So I just love sharing that information and being an advocate for that form of therapy because it is something that a lot of people really need.
Right, because that alone, like, I didn't know you could do dialysis at home. And
Yeah.
I've known people on dialysis, well, a few years back. So this
Yeah.
is valuable information for
Right.
people. And I hope you have a GoFundMe it's launched for this whole transplant thing. Because if you wind up in Alabama and your husband's going to have to go there to
Right.
support you, and, these are the things our audience, I really want
Right.
our audience to learn about sepsis survivors and the things that they have to go through after surviving sepsis. That's the first part, I always
That's
say.
right.
And then the second part is everything that comes
Living with it.
after. And you are
Yeah.
certainly going through it.
Yes.
So
You're
I
right.
will post all of those
Sur-
links to
yes.
help you.
Surviving sepsis is, you're right, Jackie. That's like the first hurdle. Living with sepsis is the rest of the race. And uh, you're right. The first, my friend set up the GoFundMe account, and it is still active. It is still live, and I am amazed at people that will go back, go through and make a significant donation, and they just don't realize that that really does pay for like lodging and gas and food. And if University of Alabama calls and says, Kimberly, we have a kidney, we're going. And I'm relying on friends and family to come and be there with me when I recover, because you're right, my husband does have to go to work. And he can come out again for family leave, but um, I just know I have a village that can come and just sit with me and make sure I get to and from the doctor's appointments for 6 weeks, and I don't want that to fall solely or squarely on my husband's shoulders. But I do have to pay for, a hotel room. I do have to pay for, special services to come in, because I have to be cut off from everyone until I heal. But I would never have known that
Yeah.
when I was first recovering. I didn't know this was going to be an ongoing thing, and I'm hoping that once I get a kidney, and now that I have prosthetics, and now that I can drive, all these things, I can just be me and just be an advocate and not worry about where my income's going to come from. I don't want to have to
Right.
deal with the next biggest. I'm done running the hurdles. I just want to just walk the rest of my
Yeah.
journey.
Exactly. And the financial thing is huge. It really
It is
is.
huge.
Even when we're sickest of our sickest that we can be,
Yeah.
like, we
It,
know that it's there. We know it's in the background, and these things
and
don't
I'll
come
tell you,
free. And
it doesn't. And there's just not any good information out there about the longevity of someone who survives sepsis, survives the level of sepsis, the shock that I dealt with. And that goes back to the need for research. That goes back to the need for pulling my story, your story, my friends, my mentee's story. Collectively, we need to have everyone's story compiled and researched and analyzed, so that I know what my life expectancy is going to look like at year 5. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to expect in year
right,
5, and I don't know what to expect. What happens when you deal with sepsis and menopause? What does that even look like?
yeah,
What does sepsis look
right,
like if you're dealing with, another chronic disease? So I know, because of my advocacy work, and because I'm working as a mentor, and I've mentored at least 6 people now who all have had sepsis. Let me tell you, they're they're women, interestingly enough, and
yeah,
out of the 6, 4 of them were teachers. Now, I am a scientist at heart, and I'm going to tell you, there's something there about teachers who have urosepsis. What is the correlation? Um, there's
I
that's
think I have
just
a
not.
pretty good idea.
Well, I think we're on the same page. But
I think so.
I want a doctor who this is their life's work, to sit down and look at our urosepsis tendencies, our habits, our bathroom breaks, and when we can't go to the bathroom, what does that do to our system? All of that,
Yeah.
and try to predict the likelihood of, what is a first year teacher's likelihood that doesn't have regular bathroom breaks? What is the likelihood of them developing sepsis? What is their likelihood of developing stage 4 sepsis? And what can be done to prevent it? Those are the kind of questions I'm
Exactly.
constantly thinking about. And I just don't think
Because
it's a
teachers,
coincidence.
like mothers, don't think of themselves first.
Right.
And we
Exactly.
don't get those bathroom breaks. I would go all day sometimes and then
Yes.
race down the hall as soon as that last class left.
Mhm. And it's just not healthy. But I do think then if this is a trend, if this is something that we see happens at a higher rate in this population, go back. Let's go back to those pre-teaching teachers and say, you need to make sure you are asking for, and administrators, you need to be making sure that there are scheduled breaks for teachers, because statistically, we have data to show, if not, this is something that could happen to women on your staff. Um, but we don't have that
I
data
love
being
that
collected
you
and
were a
analyzed.
science teacher.
Yes.
Yeah, I love
Yes.
that you were a science teacher and you know the
Mhm.
science.
I know the science.
Posit a theory and try to rule it
Right.
out and see what's happening, the scientific method. And
Absolutely.
it's
So when we
I
were
knew
on
exactly where
Capitol
you were
Hill,
going with that.
yeah, when we were on Capitol Hill advocating for some sort of consortium, some sort of conservancy to put all of the data together,
Yeah.
it was like, how is this not being done? Why is this a no-brainer? So if sepsis is happening at
Yes.
a higher rate in a certain population, wouldn't you want to analyze it, study it, track people? Get
Yeah.
anecdotal records, and let's sit down and talk about trends and okay, now that you 50 ladies have all survived it, you're past the 5-year marker. Here are some things we need to look for. I just, that's the pull of my heart right now, because I feel like we're dropping the ball, and too many people, too many women are being affected. And I'll tell you, I'm mentoring quad amputees. So I'm mentoring
Right.
women who all have lost their limbs at different stages in their life. I'm an empty nester. I'm 50 years old, 54 now. But I'm working with women who, still have children in their home, who still have to climb up and down stairs to
Yeah.
change diapers. Imagine what their world feels like, when they think that they're the only one. And when I introduce them to other quad amputees and we talk about the fact that we are a community, there are many more of us out there. It's refreshing on a one note, but it's sad. It's like, why us? How come us? So there needs to be a safe space for us to cry and get angry and get mad and, question everything we did. But at the same time, we need to pull together, rally, and cheer each other on, and, send each other virtual hugs, because I know you're having a rough day, but here's a hug and kiss. And without that, I don't know that I would be in the place that I am. Really, Jackie, I don't think if without finding that community that I would have been able to make the recovery that I've been able to make and feel good where I am.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said that because same. I mean, same. When I found Sepsis Alliance and I
Hmm.
started to find all of you, because up
Yeah.
until that point, I thought I was alone.
Yeah.
I knew
Yeah.
no one else who
Right.
suffered sepsis. I knew no,
Right.
and I thought I was all alone, and I felt it, and I had a very dark first year,
Yeah.
and
Great.
I tell people, and I love that you said to express those emotions, anger
Hmm.
and
Right.
sadness, and when someone would dare tell me back then, oh, just be positive, or it could be so much worse, or something like that. I wrote about it in a Substack essay, just saying, okay, that either caused me to fly into a rage, or a torrent of tears, but you were
Right.
not going to get a very welcoming response to that if you told me back then, think positive. I still kind of repel against that because I'm just like you. I have to feel my emotions. When I'm angry, I'm angry. When I'm
Right.
sad, I'm sad. And
And you have to
I
own
have
it.
to
And
work through it.
yeah, you have to own
Yeah.
it because I have to, and I tell, mentees that I work with, you're grieving. I'm grieving the loss of who I was, who I was, 49 years, 364 days, ago is not the same person who I am today. And I kind of want
Right.
her. I miss her. And so we have to be able to say, I'm very sad today, and it be okay. I don't want someone to, diminish that or downplay it. I want them to be able to say, I get it. I get that you're sad, and I get that these are the reasons why you're sad. Um, what can we do to make you feel better? And it might even be playing an 80s R&B, I don't know, Chicago song, and I need to feel
Yeah.
upbeat. The music does it for me, old school music does it for me. But for other people, it might be just sitting and watching, a good movie, or it could be that, it's just about sending a simple care package in the mail, just letting them know, I know you're going through this, or this is happening. Just those little things that make you just have to know that it's okay. And sometimes our world gets so
Right.
busy and it's easy to feel like you've been forgotten. And I just have made it my life's mission to make sure everyone I come in contact with, whether you are a sepsis survivor or a caregiver of someone that is dealing with a chronic illness, that you're not forgotten or you're not seen. And I just, I, I don't know, I spent a lot of time looking for ways to be creative, to send out positive messages to help people get through those dark days. Because, Jackie, I've worked with people that really struggled getting through those dark days. And I'll tell you this too. During that first year of recovery, I knew I needed um, mental health support. I knew I was going to be depressed. I
Yeah.
knew
Oh, yeah.
at some point I was going to hit a wall, right? But do you know when I was discharged? I think I told you this story. When I was discharged from the hospital, my discharge papers said I need to follow up with the following doctors within 7 days. Okay, that usually happens when you go to the hospital when you have emergency care. I looked down this list. I've got to follow up with 17 doctors, a urologist, hematologist, infectious disease. Some doctors I didn't even know. I didn't even know you cared for me. I didn't even know you were part of my life, right? I never met you. But do you know there was no place on that list that said I needed to follow up with a psychologist or psychiatrist? Nowhere was
Terrible.
there any mental
Yeah.
health reference. But I knew just being educated and working with children and, just knowing myself that it was going to be important to follow up with mental health services. And I tried to get in to see a therapist or a psychologist. Everywhere I called said they were not taking any new patients until the beginning of the next year. This was May. This was May.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, my goodness, I'm glad I'm not suicidal. What do people do between
Right.
May and the beginning of next year? I then started seeing commercials for therapy online. I can get a therapist online. And so I said, well, let me try online therapy. And I did. My insurance, afforded me those services. That worked to a certain extent, but I knew I needed to find a therapist that specialized in medical trauma. That just does not exist.
Right.
That was a very fine
No.
field, and I either got a, someone that was a counselor, or I got someone that dealt with trauma, but they more or less dealt with trauma that was based on your childhood or sexual trauma, something like
Yes.
that, domestic violence, medical trauma.
Yes.
And then a therapist told me that they were so overwhelmed. The whole field of psychiatry and psychology was so overwhelmed with COVID and all of that scary, people that are, sheltered in homes for months, things like that, that they're, just don't expect to get in as a new patient anytime soon. And that shocked me and
Yes.
that concerned me, and really to this
I had
day,
the same experience.
medical
Yes.
medical trauma, haven't found anyone. So what, so that is a niche that needs to be filled, needs to be delved in a little bit. We need to create a portal, that's some sort of directory, because sepsis survivors are going to need medical trauma specialists, and they don't need to hunt and peck for
Yes.
someone when they're trying to survive.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that because I had the same experience. No one was
Yeah,
taking new patients,
yeah,
or they didn't accept Medicare because I'm disabled and I'm on
yeah.
Medicare. They didn't accept Medicare. They didn't take new patients. I saw the deacon at our church had 30 years experience in family counseling and stuff when he was working for one of the county governments down in
Mhm.
Virginia. So I went and talked to him every week.
Okay,
That was helpful, but it's like you said, he wasn't experienced in medical trauma, and that
right,
is a niche. Anyone out there who's listening, who's thinking of becoming a psychologist, medical trauma, we need, I don't
right.
even know if that's an option for students to select, but Kimberly, I think maybe that's something that we also need to advocate for, is that we need to have more mental health experts who specialize in that.
Well, one of the things that came to me was I really believe that anyone that has experienced the level of trauma that I have experienced, whether it be through sepsis or a car accident, if I woke up and I was in a car accident and I had found out that my leg was amputated, that's trauma. Okay, if I went in
Right.
for, one situation and I coded and needed to be, resuscitated or what, that's trauma. And I believe
Yeah.
strongly, and I just believe I've dropped the ball on this, but I believe strongly that no patient should be allowed to be discharged from a hospital having dealt with a medical trauma without a psych consult. I should have been made to speak to a psychologist, a hospital psychologist, or psychiatrist before I was discharged from the hospital. I believe someone with that kind of mental health
Exactly.
experience should have talked to me to make sure I was okay to go home. And I understand that they were overwhelmed with all of what was going on with COVID. And I believe that if maybe I had had this at a different time, if you and I had gotten sick in any other year than 2021, we might have gotten a different level of
2021.
care, right? We might have gotten a different
Yeah.
level of care. We might have gotten, maybe people would have slowed down enough to consider or think about, maybe she needs to talk, but that wasn't, they were ready to get us get us out of the hospital because they did not want us exposed to COVID, so I get that. But
Yes.
I think that that is almost something I wish I could, I need to go to my legislatures and ask and say that these things should be put in, that's a protocol that should be put in place so that it's just part of the discharge process.
And
And
our jobs have gotten that much harder recently as far as, right, we need the legislation, we need people to understand, why Medicaid is important for people with disabilities. We need people to understand why mental health really needs to, I mean, we hear it, there's a lot of talk out there all the time about mental health. in this country, and we need coverage, and we need to pay more attention to people's mental health. Right. So when are we going to do this? I
Right.
mean, I've
And
been
you know,
hearing
there's
about
really
it. We've been hearing
there's
about it forever.
there's really no statistics on the mental health of sepsis survivors. What percent of them
Right.
end up depressed? What percent of them end up committing suicide? Because this is not easy.
And I know
And
of
I
one here
work,
in our county who
okay.
did,
See, that is a
you
life
know?
lost in tracks. And I just, as an advocate, I'm putting on that advocate hat right now. I'm thinking, we can storm
Yeah.
our governor's office and say, you guys, we don't think about these things, but out of my experience, I'm thinking we need to do this, that, and the third. Will you help me? Well, I need them less focused on other trivial things right now and get back to the business of looking at their constituents and addressing their needs. You and I should not be sitting here worried about
Thank you.
whether Medicaid, Medicare is going to be covered because we're disabled. We didn't ask to be disabled, but we know that our private
Right.
insurances cannot carry the load of our medical expenses. And we need
No.
this benefit, this social service benefit, to just carry on with everyday life. We didn't choose not to be able to work. We want to be functional working people, but our disability really limits that, and I think there should be some grace given and benefits offered instead of a penalty and worrying about how are we going to survive if we lose these benefits.
Thank you. Exactly. And Kimberly, you were going about your life. You were living
Right,
your life. You were ready to
right. We
turn
both were.
50. You were a school
Right,
teacher. And in
right,
one day's time, your
right.
whole world got
Whole world.
rocked and
Absolutely.
changed. And
Right,
it's never going to go back to what it was.
right.
Being a quad amputee, prosthetics are not cheap. And
No, they're not.
insurance doesn't always cover all the cost of those, does it? Especially those nicely more refined high functioning prosthetics, correct?
Right. Well, and I'm going to just say that I'm blessed to have been with the state and have good insurance. But I know
Right.
we've met people that are fighting to get prosthetics because insurance companies are saying it's not medically necessary. I don't understand that. That
Blows my
how
mind.
being
Yeah.
mobile, being able to walk out of your house and shop for yourself, that is medically necessary. If not, physically necessary, it is mentally necessary for you to achieve a level of independence that prosthetics can provide. And I don't understand. Yeah. So we've
Yes.
got to get the insurance caught up to what is considered medically necessary and what is a standard, what should be standard for everyone, regardless. And so I do think that's why Medicaid and
Right.
Medicare are so important because those benefits equal the playing field. So you get a wheelchair and you get a wheelchair because we
Yeah.
are receiving the same benefits. But you're right. I never would have thought that
Right.
I would need Medicaid. I never would have considered that to be anything that I had to think about or even know the ins and outs of because I'm not 70 something. That's not something that I thought about.
Yes.
So I only had a couple years left. I was going to retire. I did the right thing. I had retirement packages. I had my 401k. I lined up my money so that I would be independent. Life threw a curve and I had to retire. So I had to pull in and call on those things that I put aside, but it wasn't enough. And you're right. In order to
No.
be functional, in order to be able to be independent, I need a wheelchair. I need prosthetics. I now need a kidney. I need things in order to be sustained or have a life that is of some worth. And I don't feel less worthy, but I do feel that sometimes the disabled population is easily dismissed. And I don't know
Yes.
how to combat that. I don't know if that's out of ignorance and people just don't understand um, all that it is to be disabled. And I have a physical disability. You can see my shortcomings, but many people are dealing with
Yeah.
silent disabilities, and they should not feel. I
Yeah.
know, right? They should not be made to feel less disabled. But, truly, if you met me on the street, though, Jackie, you wouldn't know that I now have chronic kidney disease. You wouldn't know that I
Right.
have to do dialysis at night. You wouldn't know those things, but I shouldn't be treated any less differently or afforded less benefits because of that.
Right. And you are such a beautiful soul.
Oh, thank you,
You're the
Jackie.
people that we need on this
Yeah,
planet because the disabled are not just a community of people who sit at home and depend on everything. You
right,
get out there. You're out there driving. You're out there
right,
speaking out. You're out there mentoring other people who need you.
right.
And, we can be the community, our community can be some of the most helpful and
Yeah,
compassionate people out there. And the world needs a whole bunch of Kimberlys in it.
yeah. And
And you are
and they're
so
there.
deserving of this treatment, of the kidney transplant and the prosthetics that not just help you walk, but help you walk effectively and painlessly and more
Right,
efficiently.
right. And
And,
while I was getting my prosthetics and learning, I wasn't sitting idly by. I wanted to know, how can I get my kitchen modified? So because I enjoy cooking, how can I
right,
get in and out of my garage efficiently and, by myself? And so that is how I stumbled upon Canine Companions. And I was 2 years in. I didn't know what the next 2 years were going to, look like. And so I did. I applied for a service dog, and I thought, okay, well, I would at least have something else that could support me. And I knew very little about a service dog, really. I just knew that I wanted to fill out the application. I wanted to be considered. I looked at their website and did some research, and I was like, okay, I qualify at this point. I am in a wheelchair, and I don't know if I'm going to be wheelchair bound or if I'm going to be, mobile with my prosthetics. And so I did work through the process. And, this year I had been on a wait list for 2.5 years. And I said to this year, as I was kind of setting some goals for the year, I said, I really just need to reach out and take my name off the list, because each year they send you another letter. You're on the list. We haven't forgotten about you, but as a dog becomes available and matches your needs, we will reach out and extend an invitation for training. So I hadn't heard anything, and I thought, ugh. And they always tell you save these dates in case we call you for training, so that you can come on down and go. So I said, okay. I talked to my husband. I said, yeah, let's go ahead and just take our name off the list. You're pretty independent, and let the dog go to someone else who might need it. And so I was going to wait until after the Easter, because all the festivities. And I said, let's just get a moment where it's kind of quiet. Do you know, like within that 2 weeks, I got a letter, and they said, Kimberly, we found a dog that matches you. We think this is a good match. Can you come down for training? And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. I said, stop the trains, we're going. So I just was ecstatic. I didn't know how this process was going to work, but I was ready to go. And so I went down to Orlando, Florida, to Canine Companions for their 2-week training, and we decided to take now it's free. You cover your gas to get down there, but they have a dorm setting where you stay in a dorm like with your caregiver. There's a common kitchen where you can make your meals. But it's 2 weeks of intense training, and we decided to take our RV down and stay at a campground nearby, because I have to do a dialysis at night, and we had all that equipment and supplies shipped. So I just didn't want to have it in a dorm setting. So we went down there, and my husband's my caregiver, and the two of us are trying to figure out which dog is going to be ours. They did such a fantastic
Oh,
job matching me with the dog that, I mean, he was exactly what I need, because they put you in this room with all these dogs, and there were like four other people. Um, the other people that were getting the dog, they were all wheelchair bound. And so I was the only one that was mobile, and there were two other ladies that were there to get facility dogs. They were being trained on how to take the dog and take it back like to a nursing home or a hospital. The rest of us are learning how to
right.
get our forever dog. And so they let like 20 dogs in, and the dogs kind of roam around there, and they're watching our reactions to the dog. And I'm watching dogs jump up on people, like licking their face. I'm like, oh, don't lick me. I do not want a dog that licks. And I'm like, no, you're too much on me. And so and then we showed up on Monday. By Wednesday, they had already narrowed down the one or two dogs they thought would work best with us. Oh my God, Jackie, by Thursday, there was a pre-matching ceremony, and we stood next to this podium,
Oh my
and
God.
they announced the dog, and Noodle was the dog that was announced to be with me, and he was
I was going
exactly
to
the
ask his
dog I
name. Yeah.
needed. Yes, the dog comes named. So he's Noodle the second, and he was
Oh,
just the most laid back, looking at me like, "Are you talking to me, mom, dog?" He sits and then he
oh,
drools, and oh my gosh, the other
oh.
dogs were yappy and all over the place and hyper, and Noodle's just like, nah, nah, he was just perfect. Loved, loved, loved it. And so we were
I
able to
love
take
that they do
Noodle.
that,
Oh,
that
it
they
was it was
match
like
them.
pure science. Pure science. And they knew. I mean, they have got this down to a science. So I worked with Noodle for the next week and a half, and Noodle was training me. The dog has been trained. He was training me. He was letting me know what he needed, and he would sit and look at me, and I was like, "Oh, oh, 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 you need to go outside. Okay, let's go, go." I figured that one out. Oh, 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 wait, wait, wait. You need water. I got it. Let's go, Needle. Let's get some
Yeah,
water. It was so fun.
I
He was
got you.
teaching me.
It was a
It was
learning
great.
experience for both of you, for
It
you
was great.
mainly.
It was great. So yeah, so I have my service dog Noodle. I'll try to
Oh
get
my
him to come up
gosh.
here, and he is just up here.
Oh,
Come here. Up. Oh, I can't get my camera to come down, but
I
he
was going to say, is
he
he
is.
there?
You,
Oh,
wait. Let me see if I can get the
what
camera.
kind is
Can you
he?
see how Can you see him? Can you see him? Can you see? Hi, Noodle.
Oh,
Oh my
there he is.
goodness.
Oh,
Yes,
is he a lab? He
he's
looks
a
like a
black
lab. Is he
Labrador
a lab?
Retriever. Yes, yes. He's a black
Oh,
lab.
what
Let
a
me see if I can pull
cutie.
him. Oh my goodness, he is great. There's something that just disappeared on my screen. I'm sorry, Jackie. Can you still see me?
I can
Okay.
still see
Yeah,
you. Yes, you're
yeah.
good.
He's a
You're
black
good.
lab, and
Okay.
so he's 2 years old, and he it's easy.
Oh,
So he can do everything
what a
like
good
retrieve.
boy
I
he
drop my
is.
glasses. Yeah, he could pick up my glasses. The
Yeah,
other slime would drool. He can pick up my phone if I drop it. Those are the
yeah,
two things I drop the most. He's able to
yeah.
drag baskets of laundry from one side of the house to the other. He can pick food up, I mean, not
Oh
food,
my gosh.
clothes up out of the laundry basket and put it into the um, washing machine. He can take my debit card or credit card from my hand and give it to the cashier. He can get up and give it to the cash. It's just amazing. He
Oh,
opens and
he's
closes cabinets.
awesome.
He's awesome. He's well trained.
He's such a
He's awesome.
smart little boy.
Yeah. So again, I had, my GoFundMe account was used to cover the expenses to get him situated.
Yeah,
We had
I
to,
remember that too. Yeah, I
yeah,
was floating
we had
that on my Instagram. Yes.
Yeah, so those funds were used to get him situated with his vet. He came to us already vaxxed and all the but it's the heart guard that we
Yeah,
need to now get for him.
right.
He's a big
And that
dog.
isn't cheap. That's a couple $100 for Heart Guard
Yes,
and their regular flea and tick, their preventatives. Yeah,
exactly. So we have to stay current on that. And a kennel for him. He's got to be exercised and he's got to so it's just the little things. And it's just those extra expenses that it's nice to have another pot that you're not stressing out about to take care of those incidentals. So um, you just think you get over one hurdle, but he's a wonderful blessing. He's been a great addition to my life and to our home, and it just makes it that much more effective for me to focus on recovery because now my daughter's home, and she helps my husband with my caregiving. So there's always someone here. Not that I'm, fragile, but it's just just in case. They just want someone to be here. And then
right.
my grandchildren are here, which I thoroughly love. So I get to be here and
Oh,
participate
how
in their
old?
growth. 7, 2, and
How?
1, and I love it.
Oh, wow.
I
So you
love
got
it.
two new ones
I've
since
got
the
three.
crisis. That's
Yes, yes. And
two new ones right in the last 4 years. Wow.
it's amazing. And so I was there. I was there for, all of, their birth, and that meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to my girls.
Oh,
But just the joy of being able to be a Mimi and to be present and to
yeah.
be, so there's small blessings in all of this, and we just got to find that.
Oh,
But Jackie, I
oh,
do think
that's
we
so sweet.
we have to just keep each other uplifted, and we have to just find joy in our family and where we are, and just know that we're not done. We're here for a reason, and we're not done. So I'm glad
Exactly. And
I've
I'm
met
so
you.
glad that we
I'm
all,
glad
yeah,
to have called you a friend because you and I we just clicked, and that was
yeah.
by design. So I'm excited for that.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that our community is meeting each other, because there's in the illness communities, you have cancer survivors have always had like through organizations and agencies, they've been able to meet each other and
Right,
help each other and support one another. The
right,
other community I think of is like the CF community, the cystic
yes,
fibrosis community is
right,
very, very deep into support of each other. And now I love that sepsis survivors
mhm,
communities are
right.
coming together and we're helping
We
each
need
other
that.
because we really do. No one should walk this journey alone. No
Right,
one should.
right. We need that,
Yeah.
and we
Oh,
need
Kimberly.
to
Oh,
more effectively rally around each other and continue to have conversations like this, because someone is going to
yes.
hear this at the right time and need
Yeah.
this advice, guidance,
Yeah.
and friendship. So I know we both are extending that to
Exactly.
our viewers and listeners. So please reach out to either one of us, and let us help
Yeah.
walk along with you, because this is a journey.
Yes, I'm going to list your Instagram account too in
Okay.
the description. So I'll have your Instagram in there and your GoFundMe's and the information about the kidney transplant.
Yes,
And
thank
also,
you.
I'd like to, if you could send me maybe after this some information about the companion animals, maybe
Yes,
put
I
that in there
will.
for people to know. I know right now
Absolutely.
I'm just small potatoes. I have this dedicated little group of viewers and listeners who are watching, and but like you said, this is going to grow, and people are going to find this at the right time that they need to
Right,
find it for the
right.
support and everything. And Kimberly, I know, your life is jam-packed between your advocacy and taking care of your needs every day and your family. So I really appreciate your time that you've given us
Oh,
today. And I want to thank my listeners for coming back to hear this very important episode in this conversation with Kimberly today. We appreciate all of you, Kimberly. I certainly appreciate you very, very much, and I'm so glad that we're friends. I'm so
yeah,
glad that we met because, as you
yes,
said, it was by design, I
That's
believe.
right. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you,
So
Jackie.
thank you so much, Kimberly. Thank you.